It was a warm summer evening in the turquoise waters off the coast of the Bahamas, where multi-million-dollar yachts dotted the horizon like jewels on a necklace. Among them was the Elysium, a sleek 200-foot vessel owned by Alexander Ward, the brash and self-assured CEO of Apex Dynamics, a global tech empire. Known for his extravagant lifestyle, Alexander had gathered a group of friends and business associates for a weekend of indulgence, celebrating a record-breaking quarter. The yacht's crew moved seamlessly about, ensuring that every champagne glass stayed full and every guest was catered to. The party was in full swing on the upper deck, where Alexander stood at the center of attention. He held court with stories of his latest triumphs, his laughter echoing across the water. But as the evening progressed, the mood shifted. Alexander, emboldened by one too many glasses of Dom Pérignon, decided it was time to impress his guests with a display of bravado. Alexander unbuttoned his shirt and climbed onto the railing, grinning as he looked down at the dark waves below. The guests laughed nervously, unsure if he was serious. The crew exchanged worried glances, aware of the dangers lurking in these waters. Ignoring their concern, Alexander dove into the water, his figure disappearing into the depths. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Alexander surfaced, his arms cutting through the waves as he swam confidently. The guests clapped hesitantly, their applause mingling with the lapping of the waves against the yacht. But their relief was short-lived. From the edge of the yacht's spotlight, a shadow appeared, moving swiftly and deliberately toward Alexander. At first, he didn't notice. He treaded water casually, still reveling in his moment of defiance. Then another shadow joined the first. The water around him seemed to shift, the surface rippling unnaturally. The captain's alarmed voice carried across the deck, urging action. Alexander turned, confusion flickering across his face. Then he saw it. The final. Sleek and unmistakable, it cut through the water with terrifying precision. His confidence evaporated in an instant, replaced by pure panic. He began swimming frantically toward the yacht, his powerful strokes churning the water. The guests screamed, pointing at the growing number of fins surrounding him. The spotlight revealed them clearly now. Bull sharks, known for their aggression and willingness to attack in shallow water. Their bodies glided through the waves like shadows, their movements quick and purposeful. A life ring was tossed into the water, landing a few feet from Alexander. He lunged for it, his breathing ragged as he grabbed hold. But the sharks were closing in. The nearest one, a massive bull shark over 8 feet long, darted forward, its powerful tail propelling it with alarming speed. The first strike came without warning. The shark slammed into Alexander's side, knocking the wind out of him and nearly dislodging him from the life ring. Blood began to swirl in the water. A shallow but vicious gash ran across his torso where the shark's rough skin had grazed him. The crew pulled desperately on the rope attached to the life ring, trying to haul Alexander back to the yacht. The sharks were relentless. Another one lunged, its jaws snapping inches from Alexander's leg. He kicked wildly, his movements fueled by adrenaline and terror. Above, the guests could only watch in horror. A woman fainted, her husband catching her before she hit the deck. Others shouted incoherently, their voices blending into a cacophony of panic. The crew readied the dinghy but hesitated, knowing the risk of entering shark-infested waters. Time was running out. Below, Alexander was losing strength. The life ring slipped from his grip as another shark lunged, its teeth sinking into his calf. He screamed, the pain blinding as the predator thrashed, trying to pull him under. He clawed at the water, his hands slipping as he struggled to stay afloat. The spotlight shifted, blinding the sharks and momentarily disorienting them. The crew's frantic pulling finally brought Alexander within reach. 2 deckhands leaned over the railing, grabbing his arms and hauling him onto the deck. He collapsed in a heap, blood pooling beneath him as he gasped for air. The sharks lingered below, their fins cutting lazy circles around the yacht. They had tasted blood but been denied their prey. Slowly they drifted back into the depths, leaving only ripples behind. Alexander lay motionless on the deck, his body trembling as the adrenaline wore off. His leg was a mangled mess, the bite exposing muscle and bone. The crew worked quickly, tying a tourniquet above the wound to stem the bleeding. The yacht's engines roared to life as it sped toward the nearest port. A helicopter was already en route, summoned during the chaos. The guests huddled together, their faces pale and drawn, the earlier revelry forgotten. Alexander drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey. He awoke briefly as the helicopter arrived, its blades whipping the air into a frenzy. Paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher, their faces unreadable as they assessed his injuries. By the time they reached the hospital in Nassau, Alexander's condition had stabilized, but his leg would never fully recover. The damage was too severe, and doctors were forced to amputate below the knee. The once invincible CEO, known for his larger-than-life persona, was now faced with a humbling new reality. In the weeks that followed, news of the incident spread like wildfire. Media outlets feasted on the story, painting Alexander as both a reckless fool and a tragic figure. Interviews with guests from the yacht revealed conflicting emotions. Some felt pity for his ordeal, while others criticized his hubris. For Alexander, the experience was life-changing. The cocky arrogance that had defined him was replaced by a quieter, more introspective demeanor. He withdrew from the public eye, focusing on his recovery and re-evaluating his priorities. Apex dynamics continued to thrive, but Alexander no longer sought the spotlight. The scars on his body and the memory of those shark-infested waters were constant reminders of his mortality. The Elysium was sold shortly after the incident, its new owner steering clear of the Bahamas. The events surrounding Alexander's fall served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the wealthiest and most powerful are not immune to the forces of nature. The waters off Western Australia's Coral Coast are known for their breathtaking beauty. The turquoise waves roll lazily onto white sandy shores, their tranquility concealing the vibrant marine life that flourishes beneath the surface. But this paradise is not without its perils. These waters are home to tiger sharks, one of the ocean's most formidable predators, known for their size, power, and opportunistic hunting. It was late October 2024 when Jack Harrington, an avid surfer and local to the area, decided to visit a secluded bay known as Devil's Hollow. The name was a cautionary marker, but to Jack, it was an untapped haven. Unlike the crowded beaches of Calgary, Devil's Hollow offered perfect waves without the competition of other surfers. It was remote, quiet, and untouched. That morning, Jack had woken up before sunrise, packed his gear, and driven 2 hours along a dirt road to reach the bay. By 7 a.m., he stood on the sand, stretching and assessing the waves. The water was glassy, the surf breaking in clean, crisp lines. A light breeze rustled the coastal scrub behind him. Jack couldn't have asked for better conditions. He waxed his board, tightened the strap around his ankle, and waded into the cool water. As Jack paddled out, the bay seemed peaceful. The water was clear, offering a view of the seabed below. Fish darted in and out of the coral, their silvery bodies catching the morning light. The rhythmic motion of paddling settled Jack into a meditative state. Reaching the lineup, he sat on his board, scanning the horizon for the next set of waves. For the first hour, everything was perfect. Jack rode wave after wave, carving through the water with the ease of someone who'd spent years mastering the sport. There wasn't another soul in sight. The isolation only added to the experience, a rare moment of pure connection with nature. But as the morning wore on, Jack began to feel a strange unease. The bay, so alive earlier, now seemed unnaturally quiet. The chatter of seabirds had faded, and even the fish seemed to have disappeared. Jack shook off the feeling, attributing it to his imagination. He paddled out again, determined to catch one last wave before calling it a day. As he waited, his legs dangled over the sides of the board, toes brushing the water. He scanned the surface for movement, but his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shadow below him. It was large, moving slowly and deliberately. Jack froze. His pulse quickened as he squinted into the water. Then he saw it. A tiger shark, its striped body unmistakable, gliding just beneath him. Tiger sharks are known for their curiosity. Unlike great whites, which rely on ambush tactics, tiger sharks often circle their prey, investigating before deciding to strike. This one was no exception. It swam in a wide arc around Jack, its movements calculated and deliberate. Jack's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to remain still. He knew any sudden movement could provoke the predator. The shark circled closer, its dorsal fin breaking the surface a few meters away. Jack's instincts screamed at him to paddle to shore, but he forced himself to stay calm. He'd heard stories of surfers surviving encounters by keeping their composure. Slowly, he turned his board facing the shore and began paddling with steady, deliberate strokes. But the shark wasn't retreating. It followed him, maintaining a chilling proximity. Jack's muscles burned with effort as he tried to close the distance to the beach. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the shark's head rising out of the water, its eyes black and unblinking. It was assessing him, deciding whether to attack. Then it struck. The impact was violent and sudden, knocking Jack off his board and into the water. His leash snapped under the force, sending his surfboard spinning away. Disoriented, Jack struggled to surface, his heart pounding. The water around him churned as the shark circled back. He caught a glimpse of its massive body, its striped flanks rippling as it turned sharply. Jack's survival instincts kicked in. He swam toward his board, but the shark intercepted him, its massive head colliding with his side. The force sent him tumbling, and he felt a searing pain as the shark's teeth grazed his leg. Blood blossomed in the water, spreading like ink in a jar. Jack screamed, the sound swallowed by the waves. Desperate, Jack tried to fight back. He remembered hearing that sharks' snouts were sensitive, so he swung his fist at its nose. His knuckles connected with the rough sandpaper-like skin and the shark recoiled slightly, but it wasn't enough to deter it. The predator circled again, this time approaching from below. As the shark lunged, Jack kicked wildly, his foot striking its jaw. The impact wasn't strong, but it bought him a moment. He used the brief window to swim toward a rocky outcrop at the edge of the bay. The sharp rocks cut into his hands as he scrambled onto them. But he didn't care. He hauled himself out of the water, collapsing onto the jagged surface. The shark lingered below, its dorsal fin slicing through the waves. It swam back and forth, waiting. Jack's breaths came in ragged gasps as he assessed his injuries. Blood streamed from the deep gash in his leg, pooling around him on the rocks. He knew he had to stop the bleeding or risk losing consciousness. With shaking hands, Jack removed his rash guard and tied it tightly around his thigh, creating a makeshift tourniquet. The pain was excruciating, but the bleeding slowed. He scanned the horizon, hoping to see another boat or surfer, but the bay was empty. His car was parked on the beach 100 meters away. It might as well have been a mile. Minutes turned into hours. The sun climbed higher, its heat searing Jack's back as he lay on the rocks. The shark showed no signs of leaving, its shadow a constant presence beneath the waves. Jack's strength was fading. He knew he couldn't stay there much longer. Summoning every ounce of willpower, he devised a plan. Jack spotted a shallow section of the bay where the water barely reached waist-height. If he could make it there, he might have a chance to wade to shore. He waited until the shark swam to the far end of the bay, then slid into the water, careful not to splash. The salt stung his wounds, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He moved as quickly as he could, his injured leg slowing him down. The shark noticed almost immediately. Its dorsal fin turned sharply, cutting through the water like a missile. Jack felt the panic rise, but he forced himself to keep going. The shallows were only a few meters away. Just as the shark closed in, Jack stumbled onto a sandbar. The water was barely knee-deep now, and the shark hesitated. It circled him one last time, its tail stirring up sand before retreating into deeper waters. Jack collapsed onto the sand, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. It took him nearly an hour to crawl back to his car. By the time he reached it, his vision was blurry and his body felt like it was shutting down. He managed to climb into the driver's seat and start the engine, driving himself to the nearest town. Local paramedics were stunned he'd survived, calling his escape a miracle. Jack spent weeks recovering in the hospital. The gash in his leg required dozens of stitches, and he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. But he was alive, and that was enough. The experience changed him, instilling a newfound respect for the ocean and its inhabitants. For Jack, Devil's Hollow was no longer a haven. It was a reminder of nature's power, a place where he'd come face to face with one of the sea's most fearsome predators and lived to tell the tale. The year was 1943, and the waters of the South Pacific were a deadly theater of war. Merchant ships carrying vital supplies navigated treacherous seas, knowing that Japanese submarines prowled beneath the waves. On a calm August night, the SS Westwind, a cargo ship en route to Australia, sailed under a moonless sky. its lights dimmed to avoid detection. The crew of the West Wind was a mix of seasoned sailors and young recruits. Among them was First Mate Joseph Carter, a 32-year-old with a decade of seafaring experience. Joseph's calm demeanor and quick thinking had earned him the respect of his crew. He stood on the bridge, scanning the dark horizon, unaware that danger lay silently beneath them. At precisely 1:37 a.m., the torpedo struck. The explosion ripped through the ship's starboard side, sending a geyser of water and debris into the air. The West Wind groaned under the impact, listing heavily as seawater poured into its hull. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to their stations. Chaos erupted as men shouted orders and scrambled to lower the lifeboats. Joseph's voice cut through the panic as he directed the evacuation. He knew the ship was doomed. Within minutes, the West Wind was swallowed by the sea, leaving 45 crew members clinging to lifeboats and debris in the open water. The survivors' relief at escaping the sinking ship was short-lived. By dawn, the rising sun revealed a terrifying reality. The waters around them were teeming with sharks. The predators had been drawn by the commotion and the scent of oil and blood in the water. At first, the sharks circled at a distance, their dorsal fins cutting through the waves like knives. But as the day wore on, their curiosity turned to aggression. The survivors, crammed into 2 lifeboats and scattered rafts, watched in mounting dread as the sharks grew bolder. By midday, the first attack came. A young sailor named Danny, clinging to a piece of debris, was suddenly pulled under. His scream was brief, cut off by the churning water. The men in the nearest lifeboat looked on helplessly, their faces pale with horror. Joseph knew they couldn't afford to lose more men. He ordered the survivors to group together, hoping their numbers would deter the sharks. The heat was oppressive, and the men's strength waned as they battled thirst and exhaustion. The lifeboats were stocked with minimal supplies: a few tins of biscuits, a small barrel of water, and signal flares. Joseph rationed the provisions strictly, knowing rescue could be days away. The men whispered prayers, their eyes constantly scanning the water. As night fell, the situation grew more desperate. The darkness emboldened the sharks, their attacks becoming more frequent. One of the lifeboats was bumped violently, nearly capsizing. The men lashed the rafts together, forming a tight cluster in a bid for safety. But the sharks were relentless, their bodies slamming into the makeshift flotilla like battering rams. By the second day, the group had lost 4 men. Their absence left a palpable void, their screams echoing in the survivors' minds. Joseph's determination never wavered. He devised a plan to use the signal flares sparingly, lighting one at dusk to attract passing planes or ships. The men took turns keeping watch, their exhaustion evident in their hollow eyes and sunburned faces. On the third day, a faint hope appeared on the horizon. A patrol plane flew low over the water, its engine's hum breaking the oppressive silence. The men waved frantically, lighting a flare. The bright orange glow pierced the air, catching the pilot's attention. The plane banked sharply, circling the survivors before disappearing into the distance. Relief mingled with anxiety as the men waited, praying the plane's crew had radioed for help. That night, the sharks seemed to sense the survivors' dwindling resolve. Their attacks were coordinated and brutal. One of the rafts, weakened by constant battering, splintered under the force of a massive bull shark. The men clinging to it plunged into the water, their frantic splashing drawing more predators. Joseph and a handful of others managed to pull 3 men to safety, but 2 were lost in the chaos. By dawn on the 4th day, only 28 survivors remained. Their ordeal had taken a toll, leaving them gaunt and weary. Just as their hope began to wane, the distant rumble of an engine reached their ears. A naval destroyer appeared on the horizon, its gray hull cutting through the waves. The survivors mustered their remaining strength, waving and shouting as the ship approached. The destroyer's crew acted quickly, lowering ropes and lifeboats to retrieve the men. Joseph was among the last to be pulled aboard, his body trembling from exhaustion and dehydration. As he collapsed onto the deck, he looked back at the water, now empty except for the wreckage of their lifeboats. The sharks had vanished, their feast interrupted by the arrival of the rescue ship. The survivors were given food, water, and medical attention as the destroyer's crew documented their harrowing tale. Of the 45 men who had escaped the West Wind, only 28 lived to tell the story. Their survival was a testament to their resilience and the leadership of Joseph Carter, whose calm under pressure had saved many lives. The ordeal of the west wind became a cautionary tale among sailors, a grim reminder of the dangers lurking in the open ocean. For Joseph, the experience left scars that went far beyond the physical. He returned to the sea years later, but he never forgot the faces of those who had been lost. The South Pacific remained etched in his memory as a place of both beauty and terror, where survival often came down to a matter of chance. The summer of 2008, the Collins family embarked on what they thought would be an unforgettable adventure. They had rented a small motorboat to explore the crystal-clear waters of Florida's Gulf Coast. James, a 42-year-old engineer, and his wife, Linda, 39, had planned the trip as a bonding experience for their two children, Ethan, 15, and Sophie, 10. The Gulf was calm, the sun bright, and the horizon endless. The family set out early, their spirits high as the boat skimmed across the shimmering waves. They stopped near a small secluded reef where James and Ethan donned snorkeling gear to explore the underwater world. Sophie and Linda stayed aboard, watching the two dive beneath the surface, their forms visible in the turquoise water. Schools of vibrant fish darted around the reef, and the occasional glint of a barracuda's sleek body added a thrill to the experience. After an hour, James called everyone back aboard. They enjoyed a light lunch under the shade of the boat's canopy, laughter and the sound of waves filling the air. But as they prepared to head to their next destination, Linda noticed something unusual in the water. A dark shadow, large and slow-moving, passed beneath the boat. At first, she thought it might be a manatee or a large school of fish. But then the shadow circled back, closer this time. James leaned over the side, squinting into the water, and his breath caught. It was a bull shark, easily 9 feet long. Its muscular body moved with an unsettling grace, its dorsal fin breaking the surface momentarily before vanishing again. James urged everyone to stay calm, but the tension was palpable. He started the motor, steering the boat away from the reef. The shark followed, its shadow keeping pace with the boat. Sophie clung to Linda, her small hands trembling. Ethan, trying to appear brave, whispered questions about what would happen if the shark attacked. James assured them they would be fine, but even he wasn't sure. The boat sputtered suddenly, the motor coughing and stalling. James tried to restart it, his movements hurried. The shark's dorsal fin appeared again, closer this time. The predator circled the boat, its intent unmistakable. Linda grabbed a paddle from the deck, holding it tightly, though she wasn't sure what she could do with it. Minutes passed, feeling like hours, as James worked frantically on the engine. The shark bumped the underside of the boat, rocking it slightly. Sophie whimpered, burying her face in Linda's lap. Ethan clutched the railing, his eyes wide as he tracked the predator's movements. The tension broke when the shark lunged at the boat, its powerful jaws clamping onto the side. The impact sent a jolt through the vessel, knocking Linda off balance. She clutched Sophie tightly, both of them crying out. James grabbed an emergency flare gun, firing it into the water near the shark. The sudden light and sound startled the predator, and it released the boat, retreating momentarily. Taking advantage of the brief reprieve, James restarted the motor. The boat roared to life, and he steered it away from the shark, heading toward the mainland as fast as the vessel could go. But the shark wasn't finished. It pursued them, its dorsal fin cutting through the water with terrifying persistence. The shoreline came into view, but the shark closed the distance. It rammed the back of the boat, nearly dislodging the motor. Ethan lost his grip and stumbled, nearly falling overboard, but Linda grabbed him just in time. James yelled for everyone to hold on as he pushed the motor to its limits. Just as it seemed the shark would strike again, another boat appeared in the distance. A group of fishermen had spotted the commotion and was speeding toward them. The shark hesitated, its instincts warning it away from the larger threat. It turned sharply, disappearing into the depths. The fishermen helped guide the Collins family back to the marina. Shaken but unharmed, they recounted their ordeal to the gathered onlookers. The encounter left an indelible mark on the family, a mixture of terror and awe at the raw power of nature. In the weeks that followed, James couldn't shake the memory of the shark's unrelenting presence. He researched bull sharks, learning about their behavior and habitats. Meanwhile, Sophie developed a fascination with marine biology, determined to understand the creature that had so terrified her. Ethan, though initially hesitant, eventually joined his sister in exploring the ocean, albeit from the safety of aquariums. The family's harrowing experience became a story they told with a mix of fear and pride, a reminder of the delicate balance between humans and the untamed wild. Though they would never return to the Gulf as a family, the encounter fostered a deeper respect for the sea and its inhabitants, an acknowledgement of its beauty and its dangers. In 1997, a group of recreational divers set out for a day of exploration off the coast of Mozambique. The area was renowned for its underwater beauty, a vibrant mosaic of coral reefs teeming with marine life. The charter boat, Ocean Voyager, carried a mix of seasoned divers and enthusiastic novices, all eager to experience the wonders below the waves. Leading the trip was Sarah Blake, an experienced dive instructor who had spent years exploring the waters of the Indian Ocean. Among the group were Paul and Rachel, a couple celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary, and Theo, a 21-year-old student embarking on his first dive. The mood was light as the boat glided over calm waters, the sun casting a golden glow across the horizon. By mid-morning, the group reached their first dive site, a coral ridge known as Shark Alley. The name wasn't ominous, it was a nod to the harmless reef sharks that often cruised the area. After a thorough safety briefing, Sarah led the group into the water, the world above disappearing into silence as they descended. The underwater scene was breathtaking. Schools of fish shimmered like liquid rainbows, weaving between intricate coral structures. A green sea turtle glided lazily past, unfazed by the visitors. Paul and Rachel held hands as they floated through the vibrant landscape, while Theo marveled at the sheer abundance of life. The dive was going smoothly until Sarah noticed a disturbance in the distance. A school of fish scattered abruptly, their movements panicked. She signaled the group to stay close, her instincts kicking in. Moments later, a shadow emerged from the blue. It was a bull shark, larger than any Sarah had encountered in the area. Bull sharks were known for their unpredictable behavior and territorial nature. This one appeared agitated, its movements sharp and deliberate. Sarah's heart raced as she assessed the situation. The shark wasn't attacking, but its presence was enough to warrant caution. She signaled for the group to ascend slowly, maintaining eye contact with the predator. As the divers rose, the shark followed, circling at a distance. Sarah's calm demeanor helped keep the group steady, but Theo's inexperience showed. He panicked, kicking wildly as he tried to surface faster. The erratic movement caught the shark's attention. It turned sharply, closing the gap with startling speed. The shark's first pass was a warning. It brushed past Theo, its powerful body knocking him off balance. Sarah reacted immediately, grabbing Theo's arm and signaling for the group to stay together. Paul and Rachel moved closer, their faces pale behind their masks. The shark circled again, this time more aggressively. Sarah positioned herself between the predator and the group, her training taking over. She extended her dive knife, a small but necessary deterrent. The shark slowed, eyeing the group with unnerving focus. Above, the crew of the Ocean Voyager had noticed the commotion. The captain radioed for assistance, while the deckhands prepared to deploy a rescue dinghy. The divers were still 20 feet below the surface, their ascent painstakingly slow to avoid decompression sickness. The shark made another pass, its jaws snapping inches from Sarah's outstretched knife. Theo's breathing was erratic, his air bubbles rising in a frantic stream. Paul and Rachel clung to each other, their fear palpable. Sarah's focus remained unbroken, her movements deliberate as she guided the group upward. When they finally broke the surface, the crew acted swiftly. Ropes were thrown and hands reached down to pull the divers aboard. The shark lingered below, its dorsal fin slicing through the water ominously. As the last diver was hauled onto the deck, the predator made one final surge, ramming the side of the boat before disappearing into the depths. On board, the group was shaken, but alive. Theo collapsed onto the deck, his chest heaving as he tried to steady his breathing. Paul and Rachel embraced, their relief mixed with lingering terror. Sarah checked each diver for injuries, her own hands trembling as the adrenaline subsided. Minutes later, a patrol boat arrived, alerted by the captain's distress call. The crew relayed the events, and the patrol officers commended Sarah for her quick thinking and leadership. The divers were offered medical evaluations, but aside from a few scrapes and bruises, everyone was physically unharmed. The encounter left a lasting impression on the group. Theo, despite his fear, returned to diving months later, determined not to let the experience define his relationship with the ocean. Paul and Rachel became vocal advocates for shark conservation, recognizing the predator's role in the ecosystem despite their harrowing ordeal. Sarah continued leading dives, her respect for the sea and its inhabitants deepened by the experience. The story of the ocean voyager and its brush with danger became a local legend, a reminder of the unpredictable beauty and peril of the open ocean. For those who lived it, the encounter was not just a tale of survival but a testament to the delicate balance between humans and the wild. In 1985, the Orion Endeavor, an oil rig stationed 120 miles off the coast of Louisiana, was a bustling hub of industry. The rig, a sprawling structure of steel and machinery, housed a crew of 50 men who worked grueling shifts to extract crude oil from beneath the Gulf of Mexico. For many, it was a dangerous but well-paying job and the risk seemed manageable, until one fateful night when disaster struck. It began with a sudden explosion in the engine room. A faulty compressor had ignited, sending flames roaring through the lower levels of the rig. The crew scrambled to contain the fire, but the heat was overwhelming and the blaze spread rapidly. Within minutes, the rig's alarms blared and the order to evacuate was given. The men raced to the lifeboats, their shouts drowned out by the roar of the flames. Among them was Mike Carter, the rig's foreman, a seasoned veteran of offshore drilling. Mike took charge, ensuring as many men as possible made it to the lifeboats. Alongside him was Eric Simmons, a young engineer on his first deployment, and Luis Martinez, a father of 3 who had been working rigs for a decade. As the first lifeboats hit the water, panic set in. The fire consumed the rig with terrifying speed, sending debris raining down. One of the lifeboats was struck by a falling beam, capsizing and throwing its occupants into the sea. Mike shouted for calm, rallying the men to stay together as they abandoned the rig. In the chaos, no one noticed the dorsal fin slicing through the water until it was too late. The Gulf was home to numerous shark species, and the commotion had attracted a group of bull sharks. The predators circled the lifeboats, their sleek bodies gliding just beneath the surface. Luis was the first to spot them. He shouted a warning, his voice cutting through the din. The men clung to the sides of the lifeboats, their faces pale with fear. Eric, who had been thrown from his lifeboat during the launch, was treading water a few feet away. Mike reached for him, urging him to grab hold of the lifeboat's edge. One of the sharks darted forward, its powerful body surging through the water. It struck the lifeboat, rocking it violently. Eric screamed as the predator closed in, its jaws snapping inches from his leg. Mike acted quickly, grabbing an oar and striking the shark's snout. The creature veered off, but it wasn't alone. More fins appeared, the water around them churning with movement. The crew worked desperately to pull the remaining men from the water. Luis helped Eric onto the lifeboat just as another shark lunged, its jaws closing around a life jacket floating nearby. The men's shouts grew frantic as the predators circled closer. As dawn broke, the survivors' ordeal showed no signs of ending. The fire on the rig had subsided, leaving a skeletal framework smoldering in the distance. The lifeboats drifted aimlessly, their occupants too afraid to paddle for fear of attracting the sharks. Hours later, a rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon. The men waved and shouted, their relief palpable. The helicopter hovered above, lowering a winch to hoist the men to safety. But the sharks, agitated by the commotion, grew more aggressive. One lifeboat was rammed repeatedly, its occupants clinging desperately to its sides. Mike directed the men to climb the winch one by one, ensuring the weakest went first. Luis and Eric helped steady the lifeboat as the sharks swarmed below. One of the men slipped, falling into the water, but Mike and Luis acted quickly, pulling him back aboard before the predators could strike. By the time the last man was hoisted into the helicopter, the lifeboats were battered and half submerged. The sharks circled a moment longer before disappearing into the depths, their presence a chilling reminder of the men's narrow escape. Of the 50 crew members aboard the Orion Endeavor, 42 survived. 8 men were lost, their fates unknown but mourned deeply by their comrades. The survivors were airlifted to safety, their bodies battered and minds shaken but alive. In the weeks that followed, an investigation revealed the explosion had been caused by a neglected maintenance issue. The oil company faced severe fines, and the disaster became a turning point for offshore safety regulations. For Mike, Luis, and Eric, The experience left lasting scars but also forged unbreakable bonds. They often recounted their survival as a testament to human resilience in the face of nature's most unforgiving elements. The Orion Endeavour disaster became a cautionary tale among oil rig workers, a stark reminder of the dangers of both fire and the unseen predators lurking beneath the waves. For the men who lived through it, every sunrise was a victory, and every ripple in the water a reminder of the thin line between life and death.